Alright, so, Condemned 2, Bloodshot. This is the second franchise that I've Let's Played now, where I ended up originally playing the sequel first and then went back to the original game. So in both cases, and I would say more so in Soldier of Fortune 2 than I have in Bloodshot, I've had to approach these games with a certain degree of, okay, temper this against what I felt about it and treat it objectively. In the case of Soldier of Fortune 2, I ended up actually disliking the game quite a great deal due to really just omitting mentally certain parts of the game I didn't remember previously. Whereas Bloodshot, I feel it's not necessarily a difference in quality of gameplay as much as, I don't know, it's an interesting one. I'll get into it a little bit more when I'm talking in the more spoilery side of the review, but I'm going to keep this under 5 minutes and to keep it spoiler free. I would recommend, if you've played the original Condemned, or if you're just interested in playing a more action-focused survival horror game, Condemned 2 is definitely worth looking at. At the moment it was it's still console only as at the time of recording. I would love for Night Dive to get their hands on this game and just make a PC port for the poor bloody thing, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be on the cards. I think Jace Hall still holds the actual license for it, so I'm surprised he hasn't got in contact with those guys and gone, hey, do you want to do the thing? But no, that is stuff that will get dealt with. Anyway, as it stands, it's most likely quite cheap to find. You can grab a copy of this for like a $5, $10 from eBay or from CEX or anywhere like that. The only drawback really being it has to be on a physical console. You can't run it through anything else. I do believe it should be on the backwards compatible list with most major iterations, newer iterations of the Xbox and PlayStation lines, but I'm not entirely certain on that. I mean, personally, I bought an Xbox 360 and an Elgato game capture specifically so I could Let's Play this, so I guess that's just kind of saying, buyer beware, there is a bit of an upfront investment. But if you've already got most of the gear already required, a console basically, just as a pure game, even if the plot does get a bit progressively sillier over time, which is like the one consistent thing most people had a go at the game for, I would still say it's worth playing. It's not fantastically well optimised. I think that, again, might be just it had to be made for the Xbox 360, and I think at the time the PS3 had a little bit extra grunt over the 360. I was never a big console fan, so I never really got too far into that, but there are moments where the interface gets very dim, very blurred, the frame rate will chug. It does feel like the game was being a bit too ambitious in what it was trying to do graphically, and being limited to consoles kind of just compounded that issue. But in terms of just the basic gameplay loop, the forensic side of things is much more in-depth and actually rewards you for being more intuitive and exploring your area. The combat is much tighter, more rewarding for slightly more aggressive combat styles, and gives the player a better ability to manage encounters, whereas in the original game you mostly had to deal with enemies one at a time by hitting someone running away or hoping you'd find a gun in time and start shooting them all. So I would say in that regard, Condemned 2 is pretty much a straight upgrade, and if you've played the original and found, like I did, that the third act got a little bit too action-focused for its own good, then this is basically that, but paced quite well throughout the entire course of the game, leading to no single section feeling out of place. That being said, naturally, it's not going to be for everyone, and if you don't want to really slog through all of that just for the sake of it being a slightly better, optimised version of the original Condemned, I can't fault you. But yeah, for me, it would be a recommend. I came back to this expecting to be slightly let down, and honestly, I was pleasantly surprised by how well it held up compared to my original feelings about the game. So yeah, we'll give you guys 5 seconds to fuck off so I can start chatting about the actual spoilery shit. Alright, so, okay, so I'm going to be the first to admit, the story in Condemned 2 is not as good as the original Condemned. In the review for the original Condemned, I kind of compared it to 7, because even the developers kind of admitted that was where they were drawing some of their references from, and I can appreciate that. That's kind of where you want to go if you're going for something more urban, more, not quite noir, but just something that's very seedy and very atmospheric and very claustrophobic, emotionally and physically. Whereas Condemned 2, and I mulled this over for quite a while, trying to think about what I could compare this to. And for a while I was thinking maybe like the Eli Roth movies, Hostel, and that kind of thing. And then I went, I don't want to do the game that disservice, because I fucking hate those films. But then I thought, what about Saw? Because I think this is actually possibly the closest parallel. The Saw films started, and arguably do still try to be a very low-key, very grim, very kind of dour horror. Like, it's still very gory and very violent, but at their heart, there is a very serious, rooted kind of grounding in reality, and it takes pains to explain so much of what has happened. I find that Condemned 2 also does that, but like Saw, as the series progresses and as the story progresses, the events get more ludicrous, and the characters don't really seem to acknowledge that. There is a point where you're like, when you are fighting exploding dolls in a toy factory, and the main antagonist is a masked woman doing cartwheels with a lollipop made out of a fucking circular saw blade on a bit of rebar, and Ethan is just, like, not really acknowledging how utterly fucking ludicrous the situation is, and you're not even halfway through the game at this point. Like, it feels like Condemned 2, in terms of its narrative, could have really benefited from either leaning in to the stupid and going for more like a Sam Raimi Evil Dead kind of the ludicrousness of this situation, or toned a lot of that back and gone for something a lot more akin to the original game. It's not terrible, and if you can laugh along with it, like, I've recently monstered through the entire Neil Breen back catalogue. Like, I am a man not inured to the charms of terrible films, and I just felt that I could appreciate this game, and I could appreciate Condemned 2's narrative from a distance. The story itself is not funny. It is somewhat atmospheric in places, but very often the game goes, "Ooh, this is scary," or "Ooh, this is strange," and I'm just sitting there, mildly baffled, going, okay? Are we just not going to acknowledge that? Okay, fine. Like the fact that for some reason Ethan's plane crashes, dropping him in the lodge. Possibly his own drunken subconscious made him do that? Oh, and you punch Ethan's alcoholism to... I could ramble about the story so much. I'm trying not to get into this into over-the-top level of detail. But essentially, yeah. There are several points in this game. Oh my god, the fucking magician. Okay, the magic man, sorry. Just the fucking left swerve near the end of the game where Ethan needs to find some more information about the Oro and goes, "Oh yes, the magic man. I've heard of that guy. He's a real sick customer." Like, he has never been set up at all in either game. We show up at his place. Rosa is... Oh, sorry. To begin this... Oh, in fact, this actually perfectly encapsulates the entire tone of the game and how it fails to kind of capitalise on the tone of the game. You discover that you need to go and talk to this magic man guy with no like prior setup to what's been going on. You head to this abandoned theatre where Ethan is having a hallucination about his own alcoholism, which he proceeds to then punch to death, which somehow makes him no longer have the DTs. Okay. And then Rosa shows up and is like, "Hey, you're okay. You're just lying on the floor with loads of broken shit around you. I'm assuming you've had a good time." Starts explaining some stuff, and Ethan goes, "Cool, I'll have a look around." We then proceed to murder about 20 fucking people. Up to and including shoving some swords through a ticket collector stuck in a cage, surrounded by whirling flames. All of which is not commented on, really, by Ethan to any major extent, while Rosa is still doing fucking paperwork in the other room. We then fight the fucking magic man, throwing bottles of alcohol at him to set his platforms on fire, then drop him onto a pit of spikes. It is so... Oh no, sorry, I forgot. He then gives us some information about the Oro and where they've been doing their spooky shit, then fucking disappears. Like, at that point, it's a very black comedy. It is a very unpleasant, gory, silly fucking situation, and the game just doesn't really accept that. And I really feel that the one thing stopping this game from being genuinely great would have been if they just lent into this so much more. Like, have a cutback every so often of Rosa just casually typing away while there's just the screams and clattering and explosions going on in the background. It's like, "Oh, that Ethan, always getting up to mischief. Oh god, my spleen." Just shit like that would have just helped carry over the effect of, we're not taking ourselves massively seriously, guys, don't worry about it. But yeah, and even near the end, when the game does give Ethan big, shouty Super Saiyan superpowers where he can explode people's faces, it's never treated as anything more than just Ethan getting a cool new power to fight the evil cult. It's not, "Ethan, you can shout people's heads off. are you not even going to react to how silly this is? And yeah, there's a bit of an office fight. It felt very much like City 17, like the later stages of that, where you get like the 11th hour superpower and start tearing shit up. And yeah, like the game does get very, very silly. And I should probably not bang on about it too much. God, I've talked about it for about 6 minutes already. But yeah, it just felt like a missed opportunity to revel in the madness rather than try and focus on trying to justify all of this. Like, the game even has a stinger cutscene where the president has a heart attack because he's been told that the remedy is among us. Like, that could just be that, you know, like the fucking quantum leap? No, quantum break, I got it right the first time. God damn it, Remedy! Why did you have to make such a mediocre game with such a similar sounding name to a TV show I remember? Ugh. But yeah, like, it's just so camp and silly, and yet it doesn't seem to appreciate that would work for it. Anyway, I've banged on about and rambled way too much. But yeah, story is fine. I can understand why a lot of people went, oh, it's nowhere near as serious as the original Condemned, to which I would just silently point at the bit where you're fighting horrifically burnt mutant hillbillies in a burning mansion, then tearing the face off a big steel punk thing. Like, guys, the first game ended on a really fucking silly note. Don't give Condemned 2 shade for matching that level of silly. But anyway, one final thing I should probably mention as well, and I guess I probably should have said this earlier. I'm sorry. This whole review is going to be just a massive ramble, so fuck it, forgive me. The game does horribly squander the one major playing piece it had from the original game, which is the mystery of everything. The reason why people are going crazy, the reason why the whole city just seems to be devouring itself alive and people are inexplicably going insane, is explained as, you know, big angry hubcaps are making people go angry, and people who are, you know, homeless apparently are the most likely to do so. Which I think is a massively missed opportunity in two different ways, because in the first half, you've got, like, this could have been much more of just an open-ended mystery where we never really explain that, and that actually makes things a little bit more concerning, because if there is no discernible rhyme or reason, if there are no rules to the way this works, you can pretty much do whatever you like. It leaves you open to do more things, and it makes the player and the kind of audience more concerned because they have no safety net. They don't know that, oh, this guy's got, like, the MacGuffin necklace, that means he can't be turned crazy by the hubcaps. It's like, no, it could be anyone. Like, at any point, in the first game, there is a scene where Rosa, in a hallucination, snaps and tries to kill you. And that was great, because up until that point, you had no idea what was causing people to go insane. And having that one supportive NPC suddenly lash out at you, even if it is a delusion, was really, really effective. So, yeah, Anyway, I'm just going to stop talking about the plot now, because otherwise this is literally going to be 45 fucking minutes, and I don't have that much time. So, yes. Plot. It's a mess, but it's an enjoyable mess. Moving on to... let's talk about the graphics for a second, because it's not going to take me very long, and frankly, they're not great. The game definitely has an art style that it goes for and pulls off better more often than not. They don't go for the really uncanny valley look for the most of the character models, and it works. It's a little exaggerated. I would definitely say Ethan looks much whiter than he used to, and Rosa looks a lot thinner, and I'm not entirely certain if that was just the art direction being pushed into a slightly more commercial kind of slant, or if that was just, well, time's passed, let's change their body types a little bit, and alcoholism does fuck you up a little bit, so I could understand Ethan looking all pale and haggard can actually kind of work, even though I think he's supposed to be, like, Hispanic? Like, he's built like a brick shithouse. I guess he was probably part brick shithouse at some point. But the only real drawback to the whole game, and as much as the setting actually looks quite nice, there's that still very good encapsulation of urban decay, rot, and the enemy models look suitably fucked up and haggard after 9 months of insanity. The game just doesn't run well. It plods in places, blurs horribly, and it's compounded by the fact that very frequently the game likes to go for these interface skews. There is a period when Ethan is back in the police station, I think for the second time, when he starts hallucinating and all the black tar stuff that seems to be this recurring motif that doesn't really go anywhere starts oozing from the walls and corrupting people. And the problem is, for one, that black goo is almost Vanta black. You can barely see anything apart from the occasional glistening reflection. And you are having to move through environments fighting things that are just as dark as the background. that is not good design. That is incredibly frustrating. Like, at the very bare minimum, give them glowing eyes. Give them something for me to latch onto, because otherwise, as you saw when I did the Let's Play, I was just getting my arse handed to me by shit I couldn't fucking see until I ran into a corner and shot at anything that moved, and that kind of brute forced me through the section. So, it's not necessarily that the game is badly designed so much as there was just one motif they went for that really didn't mesh with the gameplay. And again, as I mentioned, the spoiler-free side of this thing as well, the fact that it's not fantastically well optimized, there are frame rate drops, there's a lot of blurring, I can only assume to counter some of those frame rate drops. I think, because looking back at the recordings, I noticed that certain smaller locations had very little motion blur, but when I went to bigger locations, that motion blur became much more pronounced, and I think that was specifically to handle the bigger locations. Which is not great. At that point, you may want to rethink about how you're optimizing and laying out the levels if you have to do that level of visual compensation to keep it running smooth, but meh. Otherwise, I mean, I can't really fault the game in terms of... As I've said previously, I will always favour a strong art direction over photorealism. I don't really care how well you've scanned their faces in fucking LA Noire for that, because that always makes things look bland. When you focus on photorealism, everything looks fucking boring. At least with Condemned 2, they really went for, right, how badly can we ramp up this sense of disgust and decay and rot and really, like, saturate the colour palettes with these sickly greens and browns and oranges. And it works really nicely. And at the same time, it keeps it varied. It never feels like you're just going through homogeneous brown corridor after homogeneous brown corridor. In fact, we even returned to some of the previous locations from the first game, and they've had a little bit of a revamp. They've had some little tweaks and changes done to them, which I really appreciated. In that sense, I find that Condemned 2 did a really good job of presenting itself and maintaining that urban decay feel that had made the first game so appealing. And suppose with that really taken care of, I should probably focus on the final part, which is the gameplay. I suppose I can talk about this. No, we'll talk about the sound afterwards. So yeah, the gameplay itself, I personally love. I think it's really good. It takes everything that Condemned did, runs it through the mill of QA, finds out where the quality of life tweaks can be made, expands the combat system, and that's about it. That's all that really needed doing. The original Condemned was, for all I got slightly annoyed at some of the clunkiness of the combat, it worked. It was completely functional, and for the most part, most fights were totally fine. The final fight notwithstanding, because that was a fucking mook rush with no auto-saving, which was just fucking diabolical. But otherwise, I find that Condemned 2's gameplay just took lessons from what the original game had not done fantastically well. Things like being able to take ammunition from other weapons rather than having to juggle different weapons, being able to unlock upgrades, so say having that holster, so if you do want to pocket a pistol and stick to melee weapons, then keep the pistol for emergencies. Things like that worked really, really well. The ability to do stealth takedowns, the ability to just utilize your environment far more by clinching and smashing people into things for an instant kill. Combos, the whole combo system gave a sense of momentum and a sense of like actual timing and coordination to the combat, which had really been lost. There was generally a kind of back and forth, a very simple, brutal back and forth in the original game, where a faster weapon that was good at blocking generally trumped everything else, whereas in Condemned 2, your fists were a perfectly viable weapon pretty much end to end, even if the enemy had a gun, because you still had your taser, which was a good enough option to stun them for a second, charge in, shoulder bash, then lay into them with a combo. It all flowed really well, and while I did still feel under threat when the big set pieces kicked off, there was a definite sense of having more control over Ethan and a better chance at actually weighing into a fight and not getting massively overwhelmed. That being said, in hard mode, it punishes you. It definitely punishes you for getting cocky, but as long as you're methodical and as long as you are paying attention to the tells and you're reading the enemies and you're blocking correctly, you can feel like a fucking powerhouse when you get to mid to late game and you are taking on multiple enemies at once and just fucking steaming through them, because you've learned, you've improved, because this system is so robust and so fluid and flexible. It never feels like you're really struggling against the uphill of the controls. You're simply manipulating and using them in a way that gives you a distinct advantage over the enemies. It does fall apart near the end, yes, as you do get really, really focused back on firearm combat when you're fighting the rogue SCU guys. And again, most games do suffer from this when they go for a very action-based finale and tend to rely on one weapon over everything else. But overall, I mean, I just found that the whole experience was much tighter, much more enjoyable, and frankly, I would play more of it. There's a reason I kind of wanted Night Dive to kind of get on board with this and remake the game, is that there is a multiplayer, and people have chalked this up to the reason why Condemned 2 maybe did feel a little unpolished is that it was made in the time when everything basically had to have multiplayer, and that took people and time and money away from the main development of the game. So I just feel that with that kind of combat system, with multiplayer, I would really enjoy that. I had a little tweak of it back when I was actually playing the original on the Xbox 360, and I really liked it, personally. I felt it was really... It was a different experience to basically any other multiplayer game I'd played, which had typically been FPSs. So, yeah, I would love to see more of this game. Just as I realised I completely omitted it. The music as well. The music generally is fairly okay. I never really noticed it being... So the score, I suppose, is actually fine and didn't really come up too much. The sound effects I found were a little bit weird. There are multiple occasions throughout the game where you're hitting people and there is little kind of scrunchy, metallic sound effect stings, like a kind of sound. And sometimes they're fine, diegetically, they made sense, and when you're like in the middle of a fucking fight and you're just hearing this crash and bang and like blood rushing in your ears. But when you're just like in a big open empty room, you throw a chair across the room and it bounces off the head with a it sounds weird. I feel like maybe the game should have saved that for like more specific moments when Ethan is, let's say, losing focus and going mad and like going crazy, that the sound kind of distortion starts to get a little bit more pronounced. But again, it never took me away from the experience that much, and those moments where it did feel a little bit out of place, I could laugh at it because I was laughing at a good amount of the game anyway. It's enjoyable, and frankly, that's all the game really needs to be. Anyway, that's been long enough. I will leave it here. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble about this game, and I will be back later with some weird stuff. Well, you know, weird stuff for me, at least, which is pretty fucking weird. Anyway, fuck it. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.